What is the cheapest used car you can buy with over 900 brake horsepower standard? Today you'll find out as we look at the 5 cheapest cars with over 900 brake horsepower. Let's get straight into it. The cars in this video are listed from most to least expensive, and the most expensive of the bunch is more than double the price of the next cheapest car. That's how rare it is to find a bog standard car with over 900 brake horsepower. It's the Ferrari SF90 Stradale, which is actually an incredibly strange offering from Ferrari, given it doesn't really have a predecessor. Where the 296 had the F8 before it and the 488 before that, the concept of a non-limited edition, mid-engine Ferrari that isn't the company's flagship hypercar hasn't really been seen since the Testarossa. This car literally shares its name with the SF90 F1 car and has some F1 inspired features too, like the drag reduction system used on the rear wing to help the car reach a top speed of 211 miles per hour. Unreal. He's come with a 4-litre twin turbocharged V8 engine that combines with 3 electric motors to produce 986 brake horsepower, taking the car to 60 in 2.5 seconds. Absolutely mental, but still means it's only the 3rd quickest car to 60 on this list. It was Ferrari's first plug-in hybrid road car, and those electric motors make 217 brake horsepower on their own, so it's not a slow car in EV only mode. I love the design of this car, particularly the flying buttress at the rear end, similar to the 599, and the side profile is not dissimilar to the 1960s 330 P3/4, so more race car inspiration. Ferraris are not immune to depreciation though, especially not these days, as brand new these were well over 400 grand spec'd up, but now they're listed anywhere from around 250k, and you need to spend around 280k in general to get into one from around 2021. Early doors, there was a pretty nasty recall on these due to a faulty turbocharger oil delivery pipe that led to a do not drive recall for affected cars. Outside of that, there have been a few smaller issues with the electrical system, but I'm broadly talking about iPhones disconnecting from CarPlay and stuff like that from what I can see on forums. As I mentioned, we can cut the price in half and a little more to get onto the 4th cheapest 900 brake horsepower car you can buy, the Porsche Taycan Performance Plus Turbo S, a car I recently had the chance to thrash around on track, which was a super interesting experience. Of course, with EVs you can get some serious power out of them relatively easily compared with combustion engines, and the delivery of that power can be neck-breaking. So the Taycan's real party piece is its launch control, but that's not to say it didn't handle itself on track. While the power does help to hide the fact that it weighs almost 2,300 kilograms, it is still a bit of a chonk out on track, particularly in tighter corners where you can't use that power so much. That's not to say that it wasn't crazy impressive, but I think I'd rather be cruising on a nice Grand Tour than hammering one around the Nürburgring. These come with 2 electric motors powering all 4 wheels, putting out 938 brake horsepower, taking them to 60 in 2.3 seconds, and I can tell you firsthand they are crazy quick, but somehow the lack of noise makes them feel about the same to 60 as the 992 Turbo S. It's literally the 2nd most performant version of the Taycan, of course, with the Turbo GT being another step up, breaking the 1000 brake horsepower mark. I just think it's utterly mental that something as sedate as a Grand Touring estate could be running performance above and beyond icons like the Bugatti Veyron. It almost feels wrong, but makes me understand why Rimac have gone so far into ludicrous brake horsepower figures with the Nevera R to ensure hypercars are still hyper. These start at around £119,000, you'll find plenty more around the 130k mark from around 2024. Software glitches with the infotainment and navigation are the most key issues I could find on forums, as well as issues with the charging system being slow. If the battery goes wrong, the story could be awful for your wallet too, as some unfortunate owners have found out. We're finally going to drop below the 100k mark for a 900 brake horsepower car now with the Lotus Emea R, a relatively new car from the brand that has already suffered pretty heavily from that well-known EV depreciation. 10 years ago, the concept of a large, heavy, executive liftback saloon having a Lotus badge would be laughable, but in 2025 it aligned with the EV strategy for the brand, and like the Taycan, to hide the 2,550 kilograms, they've just thrown a bunch of power at it. It seems simplify then add lightness has been replaced with bloat then add power, but regardless, hopefully for the sake of the brand, this strategy pays off. I mentioned the concept of hypercars. Well, Lotus literally called this car a Hyper Grand Tourer, produced in China and built to directly compete with the Taycan we just mentioned. It's got features like active aero, where the front grille spoiler and diffusers actively work together to reduce drag and increase downforce when required. Pretty mental. They also work alongside the active air suspension, which feels the road 1,000 times per second to adjust the ride for comfort and control. Lotus are even proud of the rapid charging, which can get the battery from 10% to 80% in 14 minutes. Sounds absolutely unreal if you fancy sitting around for 14 minutes. I'll be at least 11 minutes down the road once I've filled an Exige up at the pumps. Of course, it's another EV with two motors making 905 brake horsepower total, getting them to 60 in 2.7 seconds, so just 0.2 seconds slower than the SF90, but with double the seats and an actually usable boot. You'll find them starting at around £95,000 to under 100k as I mentioned, and plenty are now available at that 100k mark from around 2024. It's obviously too soon to really talk about this car's reliability, and though there have already been snagging issues, particularly around electronics, these come with a 5-year or 100,000 mile warranty, which helps. Parts availability has been a key point of failure in the past for Lotus, so one thing to consider. So I hope you guys are enjoying this video. If you are, then do hit like and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. 72% of you watching right now aren't subscribed. And let me know in the comments down below, what is the most powerful car you have ever driven? I'm not sure I've ever made a list where I've been able to include two Lotuses, but the next cheapest 900 brake horsepower car is this, the Lotus Electra R, the hyper SUV equivalent of the Emea R. Again, a massive electric SUV is not what you'd expect from Lotus, and even though, having been in one, it's actually a really cool car on the interior with some serious comforts and all the rest, I think the stark difference between the Exige and Electra is what makes it such a rogue car. In comparison, Porsche have the 911 and Cayenne, and somehow they come across as being closer to each other, whereas the Exige and a hyper SUV seem to have very little in common, but that's just my thoughts from experiencing both. Like the Emea, these got two electric motors making 904 brake horsepower, taking the car to 60 in 3 seconds, of course slightly slower than the Emea as it's a little bit heavier. Despite that extra weight though, it was still claimed to be the fastest dual motor electric SUV in the world on release, and like the Emea, Lotus went as far as calling it a hyper SUV, which to be fair, it probably is. It was Lotus's first car to be produced in China, and it was named after the Hungarian word for coming to life. I do find it interesting that a massive SUV is coming to life for Lotus, as opposed to a stripped out war machine that we're used to from the brand, but there we go. £72,000 lowest that I could find these listed for, and many of them can be found from 2024 for around £80,000. It's basically the same story on reliability to the Emea R, though as there have been more of these out there, a couple of other issues have been mentioned on forums, most commonly being complaints about the range and charging performance. Some owners have also had issues with bad heat pumps and weird creaks from the suspension. Taking the top spot on this list as the cheapest car you can buy with 900 brake horsepower is the Tesla Model S Plaid, which you'll be buying probably in left-hand drive given it's a car for the US market, but some have been imported over. This car doesn't just have 900 brake horsepower, the three electric motors put out a combined 1020 brake horsepower, taking the car to 60 in 2 seconds. I mean, that's literally beyond most supercars at this point, including of course the SF90 we spoke about earlier. It was pretty punchy around the Nürburgring, as with the track package, which gives it better tyres, carbon ceramics and the likes, it managed a lap record of 7 minutes 25 seconds, which is pretty sick, but the Taycan Turbo GT did end up managing a 7:07, just 2 seconds slower than the Rimac Nevera, so in the battle of Tesla versus Porsche, unsurprisingly Porsche owned the Nürburgring still. The main problem it had was cooling over the long lap time that the Nürburgring produces, as it was getting hot and couldn't maintain performance for the entire lap before the track package was added, which used some clever firmware changes and additional cooling strategies to keep the battery and powertrain running better throughout the lap. That track package is pretty cool in another way too, as it lets the car hit 200 miles per hour as well, which is pretty berserk in a 4-seat luxury executive saloon style car, and it sold out almost immediately despite the extra 15 to 20k price tag. If you only need to spend around £68,000 at the bottom end, they can be quite hard to come by, but I found others from 2024 for around £75,000. The main complaints I could find on forums were around the build quality, as though you're buying a car that can violate a supercar off the line, it's absolutely not on the same level of quality, with reviewers often putting them near the bottom of executive car brands. Reports of misaligned panels, paint overspray and all sorts are findable on forums. You should definitely check out my review of another hugely powerful car, click on screen to go watch that. Thanks to Patrons for supporting you as well for watching, I'll see you in the next one.